After the French and Indian War, the English faced three fundamental problems that changed their relationship with their North American colonies. The first is going to be financial problems due to the cost of the war. The second problem is going to be what to do with all this new land along the western frontier. And then the third problem is going to relate to trade regulations that the colonies for a century and a half had been ignoring mercantilistic trade policies, and because of that, Great Britain was losing money that they are going to desperately need when it comes to managing the lands along the western frontier. So, this first problem is going to be a problem of finances. Why? Because wars cost a lot of money, and Prime Minister William Pitt spent a lot of money fighting off the French in this war. He spent 70 million pounds. So at the start of the war, the English debt was actually 70 million pounds. By the end, it had almost reached 140 million pounds, doubling the British national debt, which is essentially going to mean Great Britain does not have a lot of money to use in the maintenance of the colonies, which leads to the issue of how do we maintain this land in the West? Because although the French are gone from this land, their Native American Indian allies are still there, and those Native American Indian allies are hostile to English westward expansion. As evidence of this, of course, we have the famous rebellion, Pontiac's Rebellion, which broke out in 1763 when Chief Pontiac and a host of other tribes attacked and took over 12 British forts in and around the Midwest. Even though this rebellion was put down by Great Britain, it presented a problem, which is how are we going to keep peace with the Native American tribes living in the West and the English subjects living in the colonies who want to expand west? Well, the first thing that Great Britain figured they could do is they're going to have to maintain a border. And this is going to be called the Proclamation Line of 1763. But along that border, you are also going to need a number of troops and a number of garrisons and forts to maintain that English settlers don't cross over that border and head out west, and of course, to also protect the colonists from any potential Indian attacks. And so Great Britain figured they were going to need approximately 10,000 troops. And the total cost of maintaining these troops was going to be about 300,000 pounds, which 1 pound in the 1760s would be about $200 today. So 300,000 pounds is still quite a bit of money. And given that Great Britain is experiencing a financial crisis, they're not going to have that money. So who's going to pay for it? Well, the colonists are going to have to pay for it. And that leads to the third problem facing Great Britain, which is trade regulations. So smuggling was a serious problem in the colonies, and they had a long period called salutary neglect, where the colonies basically disregarded the mercantilistic policies of Great Britain and didn't adhere to the Navigation Acts, which would have restricted their trade with other countries. And this led to smuggling becoming a very serious problem in the colonies. Great Britain studied this problem and estimated that they had lost a total of 700,000 pounds in revenue due to smuggling. And it was smuggling with all sorts of countries. For example, during the French and Indian War, English colonists were smuggling with the enemy, the French. So the natural loose end to tie up here is going to be the smuggling problem. England stands to make a lot of money if they can simply close the loopholes on smuggling, and they can begin to finance that proclamation line and pay for the housing of those soldiers if they can simply close the loopholes on smuggling. And so that's what Prime Minister George Grenville decided to do. George Grenville decided, hey, smuggling's illegal, it shouldn't be happening, it's against the Navigation Acts, it's against our mercantilistic policies, so it's not really a tax, we will simply outlaw smuggling. And to do this, he passes the Sugar Act. Now after him there's going to be more acts you're going to need to know. You're going to need to know the Stamp Act and the Townshend Acts. But let's begin with the Sugar Act. So in 1764, Great Britain decides to crack down on smuggling. Now, I don't want you to be confused. Although they call this the Sugar Act, back in Great Britain, this was also referred to as the American Revenue Act, which shows that it's designed to get revenue from the colonies to pay for their own defense by closing loopholes to smuggling. And so, first and foremost, we want to make sure the colonies are buying sugar from Great Britain. So, sugar and molasses that might be imported from the French Caribbean islands, they jacked up the price on that foreign sugar. They also slashed the price of regular British sugar from 6 pence to 3 pence. But that's not really the main thing colonists were concerned about regarding this act. The main thing they were concerned about is its implications for smuggling. So they passed something known as writs of assistance, which allowed British officials to search colonial ships without a search warrant to see if there's any smuggled goods. If you were found carrying illegal or smuggled goods, you would of course be arrested, your ship would be confiscated, and you would have to post bond, and then you would face trial. But the interesting thing about this is that you were going to face an Admiralty Court trial, and you were going to have to face that trial all the way up in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And an Admiralty Court trial is a trial where you sit in front of a judge, and that judge is appointed by the British Crown, and that judge determines whether you are guilty or innocent. So you have lost a very important right here. The British colonists have essentially lost the right of trial by jury. Now I'll ask you, why did Great Britain eliminate trial by jury? It's an important right. Were they doing it just to be mean? Of course not. The reason why Great Britain eliminated jury trials in the cases of smuggling was for two main reasons. The first one is that by and large, American colonists did not perceive smuggling to be a crime. So if you tried a Boston ship owner for smuggling in Boston, it was very likely that the jury was not going to find them guilty of committing any crime. This is called jury nullification. The second and more important reason is that the structure of colonial society at this time was based on a concept known as patronage. So this is a time in the 1760s before you had big corporations and factories or banking systems, and a lot of individuals in these cities were in fact employed by other well-known individuals known as patrons. And an example of a very famous patron in the city of Boston was a man by the name of John Hancock. He was one of the most wealthy people in Massachusetts at this time. And John Adams said that at any time in Boston, there were approximately 1,000 people employed by John Hancock. Well, I'll ask you, how did John Hancock become so rich and make his money? John Hancock made his money through smuggling. And so John Hancock employed many people. He purchased many building projects in the town square of Boston. He had ships that were being built. And so if you were to take a guy like John Hancock and put him on trial for smuggling, he would simply be able to look at the jury, and there would be a good chance that a number of them would be employed by him, that their livelihoods would have come from the smuggling that he did. And so Great Britain created the system of admiralty courts not because they wanted to be mean, but it was because there was very little chance that a colonial jury would find a smuggler guilty of committing any sort of crime. Of course, though, the colonists are going to be very upset at this and see this as a violation of their natural rights, making them feeling like second-class citizens. Additionally, Parliament under George Grenville passes the Currency Act, which states colonies can't issue paper money. Instead, they want everything paid back in specie. Now, specie is solid gold or solid silver coins. However, the colonies don't have large deposits of gold and silver, so there's a shortage. And also, the gold that they do have, the colonies are spending and paying Great Britain this money because they're importing manufactured goods from Great Britain. So the little bit of specie they have, they're spending by buying manufactured goods from Great Britain. So naturally, the colonies begin to pass legislation in their colonial assemblies for the printing of paper money. Now, if you don't have enough gold and silver to actually redeem your paper money, that can lead to widespread inflation and a devaluation of the currency. And British merchants back in London want their manufactured goods paid for not in this worthless paper money, but they would like it paid for in solid gold and silver. So Parliament passes this act stating that colonies can't issue money, and any colony that does issue money, and any governor that signs into law a resolution to print money will be fined £1,000 and dismissed from office forever. Now think about this. This is a scary precedent because what it means is that George Grenville, with a swoosh of his pen, can nullify colonial laws for printing money. This is a direct threat on the right of the colonies to govern themselves. So this is also going to irritate the colonies at this time period in the 1760s. And so if you really think about why the colonists were alarmed in the 1760s, there's a few hooks that you can hang your hat on. I mean, first of all, they're going to be alarmed at the change in the fundamental relationship between Great Britain and her colonies. This period of salutary neglect is over, and Great Britain is starting to have a fundamentally new relationship with the colonies where she is trying to enforce trade regulations and colonial laws. Secondly, colonists are going to be concerned about the Sugar Act and the loss of what they are going to see as their fundamental right to a trial by a jury. And this is going to make them feel essentially like second-class citizens. Thirdly, colonists are going to be alarmed at the implications of the Currency Act, that Parliament and the Prime Minister 3,000 miles away across the Atlantic Ocean can nullify colonial laws and can oust their governors if they print their own paper money. This is a direct threat to the right of self-government. And then if the colonists decide to disobey any of these acts or to rebel, let's not forget that there's a standing army of 10,000 soldiers stationed in the colonies. All this together quickly begins to look like Great Britain is setting up a tyranny in the colonies, and it's not going to go well. So again, they're not so mad at the acts or the taxes, they're mad at the implications being a violation of their natural rights.